Good evening from the UK, from Buckinghamshire and I understand West Sussex. Are you near the sea down there?
Do you know what? I really don't know. I've been here
Oh,
two
okay.
years.
Right.
I'm near Pulborough. That's all I know.
Okay. Not sure. Not sure. I
Yeah.
know Eastbourne, Brighton,
Oh right. No, I'm
and
not that far
that
south.
end.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. You're more up
Yeah. A
in the
little bit
country.
further north. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. Cool. Right. We're here. I'm joined this evening by Tony Forder, crime on the main crime novelist. We will be
Yeah.
talking in detail about your spin-off genres, and but we always start at the beginning. And can you remember how you got into writing? And can you remember the first thing you wrote?
I can very clearly remember what made me write, and that was reading a book by Alan Garner called The Weird Stone of Brisingamen. Um,
Okay.
it was, I'd never heard of Lord of the Rings, but it was kind of a Lord of the Rings light, is how I refer to it. A few
Mm,
hundred pages as opposed to a few thousand. But it
right.
stirred my imagination like nothing else before. I was about 12. And I thought, well, this is great because you can just make things up. There's all these weird creatures and goblins and wizards. Oh, that
Mm,
sounds great. So I started writing short stories, and that's how I got into the love of writing. Was as far back as 12 years old, and just from that day, just started writing different things. I can't
mm,
remember the first thing I wrote, but definitely short stories was
mm,
how I went about it for a very long time. I never
mm.
even contemplated writing a novel for many, many years.
No, me too.
Mm.
Same thing here. So it's interesting that you were it was that fantasy. Lord of the Rings is technically
Yeah,
fantasy.
yeah.
That you went into to crime
Well,
as
I
for novel.
was very much fantasy, dark fantasy, stroke horror when I went into my teens. I loved people like Stephen King and Dean Koontz and people like that.
Mm,
And then I kind of came across what I regard as a crossover novel, which was Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. And it
right.
was kind of a psycho type horror type thriller type crime. And
Mm,
that for me was like a bridge across to crime, which I'd never really read
mm,
other than childhood days of the famous five and stuff like that.
mm,
Yeah, so then it was crime. My very first crime novel was a Michael Connolly book, Harry Bosch book, and he's my hero and still has been for 20
mm.
odd years.
What do you think of the TV series?
I
As
love
I don't think
Bosch,
read it. Right.
absolutely love Bosch.
Yeah.
Yes,
Do you
and
think
the
he's
follow-up
been
series.
has he been cast perfectly? Because
I
a
didn't
lot.
think so at first. I
Okay.
thought, oh, I don't know about this bloke because I'd seen him in various things, and I thought that. And of course, the one thing that he didn't have, which Bosch had, was a moustache. And I thought this is
Right.
very odd, Harry Bosch without a moustache.
Mm,
But it only took me one show to really get into it, and yeah,
mm,
I've loved it ever since.
right. Mm.
Yeah,
So you mentioned about starting off writing short stories, which is how I got writing,
yeah,
and I was a Stephen King. Pointing to, I explained in a moment while I'm pointing to my glasses.
right.
I used to read, so I loved his big, thick novels, but he did collections of short
He did,
stories as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
And so I used to love reading his
Mm,
short stories and novels. But I would read them. I would be so hooked on his books, and this is the sign of an amazing writer. Is I would, as a teenager, I would do my homework, and then once I had to go to bed, I the where we lived was a 1930s house, and the bedrooms all had windows above them. So
right.
I couldn't read without my mum knowing that the light was still on.
Yeah,
So I bought a torch and I'd be under the duvet
under
with
the
a torch.
yeah.
So I say I blame Stephen King for me wearing glasses because
Oh,
I was reading The Stand
yeah,
and
yeah.
Firestarter
Oh,
and all of
right.
those under the duvet.
Yeah, well, I
So
used to do that with comics. I used to be
okay,
under the blankets with comics reading. I was an
yeah.
avid comic reader when I was
Oh,
very young, but I did love
yeah.
horror. When I got into
Right.
novels, yeah, I very much enjoyed horror
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been? I notice your biography doesn't include a collection of short stories. Could that be something you might be
I,
tempted
do you know, the
to do?
very strange thing is, for about 30 years, I wrote short stories only. I
Mm.
actually got several published, a couple by Pan Books,
Okay, yes, yeah.
yeah, and a couple in magazines.
So they were horror, weren't they? The
They
Pan
were, well, it
with the
was,
really dark.
yeah, I mean, it was called the Pan Book of Horror.
Mm.
And then then became called Dark Voices. And I had
Right.
a story in Dark Voices 2 and in Dark Voices 4. And I
Mm.
actually went down for a launch in London for book 2
Mm.
at my favorite bookstore, the Forbidden
Okay.
Planet.
Oh
So that was,
yes, yeah. Heard of the
that
Forbidden
those were
Planet?
halcyon days. But the really weird thing was that for another 30 years, I didn't write another short story.
Wow.
The first time I wrote a novel or tried to write a novel, that was it.
Mm.
The spell was broken.
Right.
And it was only in the last couple of years that I've written 2 or 3 short stories. But
Mm.
for 30 years, I didn't.
Was it so the recent ones, is that for pleasure or you been asked to do them or?
I was asked I was asked to contribute to 2 books.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I came up. One was based on my main character in my crime books. One was
Mm.
just total invention at the time,
Right.
and I enjoyed doing it. But it was
Yeah. But
it's a
then
very
back to the
different skill
novel.
set.
It is. But
Yeah,
at
as
least
you know.
you had that skill set up already
Well,
because you remember doing
it
them
was a
for so
long way in
long.
the past, but I
Right.
do remember having to, you've really got to condense things into 3,000 words, maybe, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
different, as I say, different
See,
mindset.
right. Although I've written novels, my longest one is 102,000. I'm the
Wow.
opposite. I was going to I subscribed to a website called Duotrope, and
Mm,
every Sunday they send a newsletter with new opportunities to submit to competitions
right.
and magazines and things.
Yeah,
One of them was which I quite fancied. Do you know the movie Falling Down with Michael
I
Douglas,
do. Yeah, I
where he
love it.
goes on a rampage?
Mm.
Well, this was Santa going on a rampage, and
Yeah.
so I started this short story, and it
Mm.
was they wanted at least between 3,000 and I think 10,000 words,
Right.
and I'd run it because I love flash fiction, and
Mm.
I found I'd actually run out of steam and time. I missed the deadline, and but it's something I'll do just for pleasure because that was fun to think of
I
him
can imagine. Yeah. I mean,
going
that's
on a
such a great
rampage.
story and
Yeah.
such a great film. I love that film.
Mm.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's something I'd enjoy
Yeah.
writing as well.
Yeah. Now I notice you have a prequel novella.
Mm.
Is that would that be your reader magnet to get people into the series?
Well, it wasn't. I now make it available free on my website.
Mm.
It is available to buy, but I make it free on my website now. I don't
Mm.
tend. I mean, I do tell people that it's there, but I don't tend to draw people in by using it because it's one of those books where, yeah, it'll make sense to people who read the series, but as a
Mm.
one-off, people might lose the nuance of it
Right.
because I wrote it after I think the 8th book,
Mm.
so it kind of features a lot of things. It refers to things, and you can see the future coming out sort of
Right.
way back when. I
Yeah.
allude
Yeah.
to different people and different aspects of the
Mm.
character that's going to come.
Mm.
So unless you know that character, it probably, I think it's an enjoyable story. I loved writing the story because it was so quick.
Mm.
I mean, it's a novella, so I think it's about 40,000 words, something like that.
Okay.
So it's quite a long
That's
novella,
I was going to say that's yeah.
yeah, but
That's
it's
I
not a
think
novel. And I
okay.
deliberately didn't want to make it a novel. I
Yeah.
deliberately wanted to do a fast tell,
Mm.
and
Mm.
it was a bit longer than I had intended, but it was a complex story as mine tend to be.
Mm. So we were talking earlier on before we hit recording that
Mm.
about a former job you did. Are you able to write? Do you write full time now? Do you?
I have been since 2018.
Okay.
Um, yeah, that was I only got my first publishing contract in 2017.
Mm.
But by halfway through the following year, I decided that, I was coming up to retirement anyway. But I thought, you know what, this is something I really want to do. I was earning okay out of it. And I thought I'm going to push it. And of course, that gave me the space to write more. So I was producing a lot of books. So it's not at my kind of level on the ladder, my rung on the ladder, I should say. It's the more you produce, the better your income, obviously. And if you're, one of the mainstream writers, you get to release one book a year, maybe two if you're lucky. Whereas one year I released four. That I didn't write four in that year, but I managed to release four because of the stages of writing. So that was a prosperous year.
Because you said that you'd started, were first published in 2017, and I was looking at your biography. You've got 17 books in total.
Yeah,
I made it.
I had two going in, and I had one in the writing by the time I got my first contract. But then I was kind of doing, 2 to 3 books a year once I got to do it full time. So
you could. I mean, you clearly love it. So it's not a hardship to. You're not one of these. I heard a quote today. I've been listening to a podcast that they say that it's not true in my case actually, that writers' houses are the cleanest because they procrastinate by doing the cleaning. But you're obviously, I'm guessing, are you quite disciplined at? Do you sit down at your desk and
until we moved to this house, and sort of with the move and kind of a year of illness that followed, I've kind of got out of the discipline to a certain degree. But up until that point, I was very much an 8 till 5 writer. I kind of just said, this is my living now. I'm going to do, a day's worth of work every day. And that's how I approached it. It's slightly different now. I've kind of cut down a little bit. But I was very much dedicated to being as professional as I could be right from the beginning. And I did. I find it easy to be disciplined when I'm enjoying something, as most people do.
It's an incentive, isn't it?
The only part of writing I don't like is editing, and only one part of editing, which is my grammar edit, which I detest. Right. The rest of it I love, especially the creation.
Yeah. See, editing my own work. I love editing other. That's my day job, editing other people's novels. But editing my own is just, I find it quite torturous. Fortunately, I have a very good editor.
Right.
So I don't send him a first draft, but I'm kind of happy with what I've got and then send it off.
Yeah.
And he's very tolerant with mine. But well, I love doing other people's. But you do get too close to your own, don't you?
I love the first draft, and my favourite part is the second, where I kind of tear up that original story and write the book, if you like.
Right.
Because the first part is getting the story out of my head. The second part is, okay, this has got to be a book now. So it's kind of restructuring, and I tend to add maybe 20,000 words during that part. And then in the next part, I shave off about another 10 when I'm pruning. But then I get to the grammar edit, and that one, I mean, I know there's an editor to come, and I have beta readers and art readers, but I like to get that book as close to okay as I can before it goes out to anybody.
Yeah, it's only fair, isn't it?
I think the only person who gets a first draft is my aunt. Yeah, she's very strict. So
right. So you have to. Yeah, that's a good incentive to get it pretty good shape.
Yeah, before, she gets first draft, and she gets first crack at telling me where I've gone wrong. So
right. Well, you've been traditionally published and self-published.
Yes.
So how do you find the journey of the difference between, because obviously when you're traditionally published, you have their way of doing things.
Yeah.
Was it fairly were you given a fair choice of covers and
Well, I
some
mean,
say in what
well,
happened?
I suppose the best answer to that is that I now do it myself. So maybe no. To be fair, I wouldn't have got where I am without them.
Right.
But I did, being having had my own business on three occasions in my life.
Mm.
Um, I found there was a lot that I'm the kind of person who expresses myself quite openly if I disagree with something, and of course, your publisher has the final word. Um, there's there were several events that led to me deciding that I would go my own way, um,
Mm.
and I enjoyed some of it, and I missed some of it actually. There are
Mm.
parts on this that that time when you're offered a contract was always something special.
Mm.
And there was also a little bit of sort of camaraderie with other authors within the group.
Mm.
Although I still talk to several of them who have subsequently left as well. I
Right.
still talk with them quite a lot.
Mm.
But at the time, yeah, I found you agree and disagree on some things, and you have to let things go. Covers was okay. Didn't that was I was consulted on those. Editing I wasn't. Um, Obviously pricing and advertising and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That was, and the worst part for me was they had no deadlines, which was a very good thing. They didn't
Okay.
say you have to do. However, they did say we want you to do this.
Right.
So after five Jimmy Bliss books, which was kind of is my big thing,
Mm.
they wanted me to do something else.
Okay.
They offered me a 3 book contract to
Mm.
write a different series. And I
Mm.
said, well, I'm not finished with this one. So that kind of became the part where I said, well, I'm going to continue writing Jimmy Bliss. And if I have to do that on my own, I will.
Mm. So you're not one of these people who needs a deadline to, as
I,
Douglas Adams said, he's, enjoyed the whoosh as it goes
yeah,
by.
I mean, there are deadlines and then there are deadlines. I found it was a little bit too enveloping. I kind of I enjoy doing things at my own pace. I mean, I'm quite quick at it anyway once I get
Mm.
going, but there are certain, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So, they would often want the book long before I was ready to give them the book.
Right.
So in the end, I thought, well, why am I putting that pressure on myself?
Yeah.
I took it was a huge gamble leaving,
Mm.
obviously.
Mm.
But by then I had a following. And I thought, well, if I can take that following with me with this series, I mean,
Mm.
fortunately, I've done other things as well as that series since.
Mm.
But that series is the one that carries me. It's the one that sells the best. It's the one that I have the most readers for.
Mm.
So it was a big deal. After 5 books, I thought I'm not ready to give this character up, and I've
Yeah.
just finished my 12th, so I think I made the right decision, but who knows?
Well, with 17 books, I'd say yes. A dozen more than you had at the time.
Yeah.
So do you find well, I don't know if I should ask whether you set your own
Hmm.
deadlines. Have you found, or you may not be able to answer this question, whether you've
Yeah.
been more prolific working for yourself? Because now obviously you have to do all the marketing
Hmm.
unless you hire somebody to do it.
Yeah.
Have you found, for reasons of productivity rather than other
Hmm.
reasons, that you've done more than after
I
leaving the publisher
I
than?
did initially. I mean, my first year after leaving was that year that I produced 4 books.
Mm.
But as I say, that was a lot of timing. But I've released quite a few in a short period of time. So I think it was a combination of things, because I was working
Mm.
full time and
Mm.
because it was now all me. I
Mm.
kind of, because I'd run businesses before, I'd put my business hat on.
Yeah, you have to,
And
don't you, as an
yeah,
author?
and I set aside my writing time and I set aside my business time, and I never
Mm.
allowed the two to sort of overlap. I found myself a great cover designer. I found myself a great typesetter. I've had various editors. So I do I do my own advertising on Amazon and Facebook, and obviously I do a lot on social media. But there are certain things that I won't mess with, and I love having good covers, so I would never have done that myself. And I have a great cover designer I work well with. She does all my social media stuff.
Okay, that's your cover
So that's a
designer,
good
does it?
relationship.
Social media as well.
Yeah, and I also have a really good typesetter who I found on Fiverr,
Okay.
and he's very good, very timely. He sort of turns over. My books tend to go between 100 and 110,000 words, and he turns that over in about 8-9 days. And they're always spot on. I don't like messy typescripts when they come out in book form, especially. Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of finding good people to help you. And then I also found different people to do some promotions for me and blog tours and stuff like that. But yeah, I keep the world separate.
Yeah. And do you have a newsletter as well that goes out to?
I kind of do.
Okay.
And I kind of don't.
Because
So,
I did.
yeah.
I'm working. I have all these people signing up, and I haven't done any for a couple of years. And so this is on my jobs list, fairly near the top, to get that back up and running.
I did everything. I mean, we were talking about a specific course earlier, and that talks about getting newsletters out and stuff like this. So I set one up. I got an awful lot of people signed up who signed up for the freebies and then buggered off.
That's the thing.
And I'm not, I'm not very good at keeping that up to date. I tried again a couple of years ago, but I kind of find social media a better way to involve myself with people. I also have my own locked Facebook group. So I've got about 150 people in that group who are fans of my work, and they're also my ARC readers as well. But it was set up as an ARC group, but then I found, well, that's a bit restrictive if it's just for ARCs. So I expanded it to be just, well, look, here's the first sight of the new cover, and here's this and here's that. So it became just a fun thing to do. And I much prefer doing that.
Yeah. So an almost instant newsletter rather than, because newsletters do tend to go into the ether, don't you? Unless you have somebody, you can have a look at your statistics to see who clicked and what they clicked on and so on. But you're not getting anything back unless they email you.
Yeah.
And often when you say, oh, please, let me know about something, it rarely.
Yeah, the response is very limited. I find I'm lucky if I get 50% opening them.
Yeah.
And a few responses. Sometimes I send out stuff and sort of say, have you got any specific questions? That often gets people mailing a bit more. If they want to know more about the books or know more about the characters, a bit of insight. But again, now I do that quite regularly in my Facebook group. I just had, here's an insight section, and I give them a bit of insight into book titles or how I wrote something. And they find that interesting. Nice. The feedback is great.
Yeah. I noticed from your biography that some of your books are set in Wiltshire, here on in southern England.
Yes.
But you also have one set in Degrees of Dark. No, 15 Coffins is set in California.
It is.
Did you go there and thought you'd set somewhere?
My mum lives there.
Okay.
So I was going to set it in this place called Columbia. Now my mum lives in a place called Sonora, and just north of there is this town called Columbia. It's partly new but partly original old Western type place. I was going to set it there, but the theme I thought required me to invent a place, because the theme was the aftermath of the school shooting.
Okay.
Now, for various reasons, although the school shooting is actually the lesser part of the whole book, but it refers to it. And I thought, I don't want to have a real place for this.
No.
So I invented a place as an amalgam of
Mm.
the little towns there. And and I thought a school shooting has to be set in America, really. I mean, you could do one in England, but it's so rare that
more difficult to get gun.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
so
in theory,
yeah, in theory. So I thought myself, no, I'm gonna set it there. I kind of know I know the place very well. I've visited there many times, and I loved it. I loved the only. It was also my first female lead in that book.
Okay.
So yeah, there were several risks I was taking with that one, really. And it was a book I almost never published. In fact, it's sat sort of on my cyber shelf, my digital shelf, for about a year, because I wasn't happy that I'd got the female voice. So I then sent it off to a couple of people, a couple of authors that I know, and also someone I was told was a rigorous reviewer who would be absolutely honest, who had never read any of my work. And I sent it off to 3 people, and they all came back and said, "You have to publish this."
Okay, good.
So that was it. I did.
So you did?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I understand you're a bit of a musician. Listening and playing. You've got 5 guitars at the latest account. Can you? This is, it seems a silly question. Can you play? One would think if you've got 5 guitars that you can play.
When I was younger, I played in bands and stuff like that. When I was a lot younger. But I've always kept. I used to do a bit of self-recording and stuff like that as well. And at one stage, I had about 11 or 12, and eventually I whittled it down to 1 guitar, which was an old one I bought 43 years ago now. But somehow over the last few years, it's gone up to 5 again.
Going back up again.
Yeah, and the last one was the most expensive of them all.
Okay.
So I still play pretty much every day. Just to sort of keep my fingers going, really. Yeah. I've always loved music. If I could have been anything, it would have been a professional musician. But I just knew I didn't have whatever that was. I didn't have it in me.
Yeah, sadly, in theory, most top guitarists have. I think with anything, with writing, you have a skill, and then you learn. It is a craft.
Yes. Yeah.
And you learn it as well.
Yeah.
But I think music it's still an art. Creative writing is an art. But yes, it's there's skill and
I mean, sometimes teaching. I think there's just something inside you as a person that makes you commit every moment of every day to that. And there's a famous song that says, "Played until my fingers bled," and that's literally what you do when you're learning.
Don't your fingernails go tough?
Well, with the strings. The right on the tips of your finger. But there was I won't say this. There was a famous guitarist who used to have to. He used super glue to put the tips of his fingers back on.
Grief.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there's something genius about some guitarists, and there are everyday guitarists who play in bands and stuff like that. But I thought, to be a professional, you've got to have.
If you want to do it as a career,
I had a great mate who was a professional guitarist who played in several bands, and he was so much better than me that I knew I'd never stack up. So I just do it for fun now.
But you had another love. Your short stories led you to writing novels. So. And here we are.
And here we are. Yeah, I mean, who knew? Indeed. I mean, I was a hobby writer until I got made redundant. And then my wife said to me, "Why don't you go back to your writing?" I saw an advert for people to submit books, and I just took a chance.
You did.
I thought the best I could hope for was somebody say to me, "You know what? If you did this, this, and this, that might make a decent book."
Yeah.
Instead, I got offered a 2-book contract. So there you go.
And there's one still, literally still warm, came out a couple of days ago on
Yes,
Monday.
it came out on Monday, which was the 12th book in my DI Bliss series,
Mm.
the 18th in all. And that came out on Monday, and very,
Do you have
very
a
pleased.
paper copy or a
I don't
hardback
have a
copy of
proper
it?
copy. I have my not for release copy, which is here.
Okay. Oh, nice. Yep, like the cover.
Yeah, it's as I
Something
say, I
wonderful.
love my designer, and we decided to
Mm.
go for a slightly different theme because without giving too much away, he's reached retirement age, and I realised that he could continue working for the police, but not as a warranted police officer. So that's
Right.
what he does now. So we changed the theme of the covers, although it's the same
Mm.
series, and we just sort of subtle changes to it,
Mm.
but
It's,
it's gone down brilliantly with the people who enjoy the series. So I'm
yeah,
thrilled.
wonderful.
Yeah.
That's the trouble that Ian Rankin had when he
Mm.
was, because this is the age-old question. Do you age if you're writing a
Yeah.
series, do you age your characters or
Yeah.
do you keep them at but
Yeah.
then if you're writing detective, they tend to progress
They
through the
do.
force.
Well, my
So,
biggest problem came between books 1 and 2 because when I wrote the first book, I never intended for there to be any more. For
mm,
me, I was a hobby writer; it was just a one-off. But
mm,
I'd written it in 2005. When I submitted it, it was in 2017, but
mm,
I hadn't changed it. So when
right.
they took it on, it was set then. And
Mm,
when I realized that they wanted me to do a second book, I said, oh, I'm going to have to change it, bring it up to date. And they
mm,
said, well, you can't because we've already given it to the editor, so you can't change it.
right, right.
So I had to say, well, either I carry on in that timeline
Mm,
or I bring it up to date and I have to somehow skip 12 years.
mm,
I chose the latter and I'm glad I did, but I had to
mm,
explain away those 12 years. But of course, he
sure.
aged 12 years between books 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Consequently, he reached
Mm.
retirement age a lot earlier than I would have liked.
So is this is in the Bliss? Is this
Yeah,
one of the Bliss
it
series?
is. Yeah,
And this is the 12th?
this is book 12. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yep. So
yeah.
what are you working on? Oh,
Well, I've
what
almost
sorry,
gone.
one more question before we
Mhm.
go into to what next.
Yeah,
Because you write series and standalones,
yeah.
do you have a preference between the two? If you had to, if somebody said to you, right, you can't write one of them,
Mm.
would you? I'm guessing I kind of know the answer. There might be series.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I love this particular series. I've had a go at
mm,
another couple of series. You mentioned the Wiltshire one. I've done two
mm,
books in that series. I also did two action adventure thrillers, and they were the most fun I've ever had writing those two
right.
books because I could just express myself. I didn't have to think about red herrings and leaving clues and all this. It was just,
Mm,
shoot them up, blow them up kind of stuff. And I loved
yeah,
it, absolutely loved it. Best time I've had. Some of the best characters I've created. Absolutely
mm,
loved it. And I want to do a third and final one at some point.
mm,
I'm not sure if I will, but yeah, I mean, if I had to choose, it would be to carry on with Bliss because I
yeah,
just love the characters.
yeah.
You know,
And is it going to be open-ended? Because I guess you could slow down. Do they cover a
I have
certain time
slowed down.
frame? Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I've slowed down in recent years. I mean, as I say, he retired in the previous book. He's
Mm,
now a civilian doing cold cases and also a senior investigating officer. I didn't know he
mm,
could do that until I spoke with my police advisor, and he
mm,
said to me, "No, he could do both jobs." So I said, "That's brilliant. That leaves it open to work with his
this,
old team and the
yeah,
new team. That
yeah,
gives me a fresh impetus." So I loved writing it, and this, the new one has gone even better. So
mm,
yeah, I thought I would stop there, but when I realised that I could give him a new lease of life, which gave me a new lease of life, I thought, no, there's
mm,
more to say. Actually, the
mm,
book's called Something More to Say. So, and that's how I felt. I thought, well, he's just retired, but there's more to him. There's more to come.
mm, yeah,
So yeah, that's what I've done, and it was a risk, but
mm,
I've really enjoyed a new style of the same character.
Mm.
Yeah,
This is the question that I don't think I've asked before. Minor characters have come up, but never specifically asked this. Whether you, whether there are, because you've written so many different types of
mm,
books, whether there are characters, minor characters from books that you'd like to bring forward and have as main
absolutely.
characters.
The,
Right.
the two action adventure books I mentioned.
Mm,
Um, Now there are two main characters in those books, but it's
mm,
the minor characters that I love most. In one of them, I set it in New Mexico. Mostly, it's about 90% of it is set in New Mexico,
mm,
and I invented this old time sheriff and a Native American, and I absolutely adored writing those characters. And I would
mm.
love to write a book about just them two.
Right.
I'd love to. I'd love to
So
revisit them.
could that be next? Do you find, because I always work on at least two books at once,
Mm,
because if I get stuck, maybe not so much for you because you've got so much in the series, so
yeah,
it's a fairly natural, it's quite
yeah.
fluid. Um, but do you find that writing different things helps? That maybe when you get to the end of this, the
Mm.
13th one, or you could
Well, up
switch to.
until last year, um, I did pretty much two Bliss books and then something else. Two Bliss
Mm,
books, something else. So
mm,
I enjoyed that break.
mm,
But since I've decided to kind of limit my writing more, since we moved and sort of a new area to explore, and I have, reached retirement age,
mm,
I've decided to write less.
right.
So I'm kind of looking at a book a year, maybe three over 2 years, something like that.
Mm,
And I've kind of devoted myself to finishing the Bliss series.
mm,
I don't know when that's going to be. It could be any book.
mm.
Um, but I've already written the end for the
Okay.
future. So I know my very
Right.
last chapter. I've already written the very last chapter. So
Yeah.
yeah, I have that in
Just
mind somewhere. Yeah.
just see what takes you in between.
Absolutely. I mean, I
Yeah.
think for me, it's going to be if it starts to feel stale,
Mm,
that'll be the point that I pull the plug. Yeah.
mm. It must be. I don't know. How do you feel when you have readers who say, "Well, if your book comes out on Monday, there may well be readers who've read it already.
Mm.
Here we are 2 days later, and
Yeah.
they say to you, "When's the next book coming
Mm.
out?"
Oh, I've had
And
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's one of those things where because I think they read so much, it's just an expectation that there's a sort of conveyor belt.
Mm,
And I've told my sort of close, in my Facebook group, I've told them all that I'm backing off a little bit, that
mm,
there will be fewer books in the coming years, and they
mm.
will be Bliss until the series is finished. And they're
Yeah.
quite happy that it's going to be him.
Mm.
But yes, they want the new one now.
Another one tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, please, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is lovely. It's lovely to hear.
Yes, absolutely.
But at one point I did feel the pressure of that because
Mm,
first of all, there's the nerves of will anybody accept this, and then there's the
mm.
expectation of how do I top the last one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
always different little things to
Yeah.
spur you on.
Mm. But I think for you anyway, when you moved from traditional publishing to self-publishing, you had a few books out already.
Yeah.
So it helped the
Oh,
fact that you'd already
massively.
got a back catalogue.
I would never have.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd have ever have got to where I am without that start,
Mm,
because it exposed me to sort of a readership, and instantly. I
mm,
mean, that I think they had quite a big mailing list, and obviously there was advertising. They were
mm,
quite a well-known publisher at the time for crime.
mm,
Um, they had quite a good following. So it gave me the start. It gave me the leg up that I needed.
mm,
I always, as much as we might have fallen out, I will always give them the nod and say, yeah, I'm thankful for the start they gave me. I couldn't have
mm,
done that right from the word go and just been an
mm,
independent. Other people do, and they're terrific writers, but
mm.
getting that following, you know,
Yes.
it's the read through, getting that initial book read,
Yeah.
is the big thing.
Yeah. This is
Yeah,
all word of mouth.
it is. It's
Somebody,
massively
you're,
so.
yeah. your 150 people in your group will have,
Mm.
even if they have, half a dozen friends each
Yeah,
that read, who
yeah,
read,
yeah,
can spiral out
yeah.
of
And getting a mention
thereafter.
in some of the bigger book groups online. You know,
Mm,
if you get enough mentions in there and decent threads flowing in there, people,
mm,
I've had a few. I ran a competition last week, and had quite a few people who'd never read any of my stuff, sort of saying, well, they're going to read,
mm,
start with the first one. And it's
yeah,
always nice to pick. You notice, because Amazon, because I only publish for Amazon, because of the figures they give you, you can see your read through and you can see which books are selling best. And my
mm,
bestseller last month was my very first Bliss book.
mm.
So hopefully that's going to give me. I mean, I tend to get about 70% read through to book two.
Okay. Hmm.
Um, which I feel, is I think is really nice, because there's a lot of people, you know, tend.
Mm.
I've read recently a lot of people saying they don't really like long series.
Okay.
So if you've got, like, more than six or
Yeah.
seven books out, they won't even start,
Wow.
which I find a bit odd. But
There is also the thing is that my fiction is other than the short stuff is on Kindle Unlimited.
right,
And I see that on in the royalties estimator,
yeah,
you see the little spike
yeah,
where somebody's started it, and
yes,
you like to think that they haven't got to page 3 and think, oh, this is a load of
yeah,
rubbish,
yeah,
that they've read the first few pages to bookmark it,
mm,
so that it's there in their library,
yeah, yeah,
and then they can go back to it. So you
yeah.
never know with the other. I mean, if you've got 70%, that the other 30% might have it there and just haven't got to it yet.
Yeah, I think it's natural that there's a drop off,
Mm,
because not everybody's going to like book one.
mm,
I always say, if I'm brutally honest with people, and I tend to be, I always say to people, I don't think my series really kicked off until book three.
okay.
One and two are kind of placeholders, but book three is
Mm,
when I felt this could be something. And I felt
mm,
my writing had improved dramatically
mm,
from the first
mm,
book. So I'm always honest with people and say, I wouldn't start there, but that's where it really kicks off. So
mm.
if you kind of just like book one and two, I think from book three you'll enjoy the series.
Yeah. Because
Um,
obviously being self-published, you could go back and re-edit them. Because I don't think
yeah,
authors do that. I've done
mm,
that with one of mine, where I wrote it so long ago that I've gone back
yeah,
and but there's only so much you can do
yes.
to it, especially when
I
you've got a series.
I re-edited slightly the first five when I got them back from my publisher, because I had to
Mm,
negotiate getting them back because they were still under
mm,
contract to them.
mm,
So once I got them back, I did a slight edit, but I didn't have enough time to edit five books
mm.
and lose the momentum of them not
Yeah,
being available.
yeah.
So I did brief edits, and I made sure that everybody knew that these had been published before. So I put
Mm,
it on Amazon and I put it on the book, that these have been published before.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I did brief edits, and I would love to go back to book one and rewrite the whole thing, but
mm.
I don't. I'm happy with the
That's
series
tricky
the way it's ended up.
when you've got so many out there.
It is.
Not just
Yeah.
the time. The
Mm.
fact is, how much do you change, which will
Yeah.
then affect
Yeah.
everything else.
And I say this to people and say, I could be happier with book one now that I
Mm,
know what I know.
mm,
And people say to me, we're still reading, so you can't have done an
yeah,
awful lot wrong.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Exactly.
I'm my worst critic, so
Mm,
I probably change every other word.
mm, yeah.
You know,
Well, I say I edit for the 100th reader because
right?
99 won't notice, and there'll always be
Yeah.
one that does.
Oh
But
yeah.
if 99 won't notice, then
Mm.
you know,
Yeah. Oh, there's always someone who's,
yeah,
especially now, even compared to when I first started, which is only a few years ago. The amount of people now who are so on the ball,
mm,
especially about crime,
yeah.
and they know everything, and they will
Mm,
pick you up if you make an error. Yeah.
mm. But there are some writers who say, just two examples, J.K. Rowling and Dan Brown aren't particularly good writers,
Mm,
but they tell a good story. And
absolutely.
ultimately,
Yeah.
that's what a reader wants, isn't it? It's
Oh,
escapism.
well, I would. I'd love to be in their bracket, but
Wouldn't
I
we
would
all?
put myself in that bracket in terms of
Mm.
I could be a better writer. But for me, the fundamental part of writing a book is to entertain.
Yeah, yeah.
So, sometimes the writing could be better. Maybe it's not always flowery that people want, but I don't
We do.
think people want that in crime
We
fiction
don't
anyway.
know. One of the aforementioned is very flowery.
Mm.
I took one of the Robert Galbraith books
Yeah.
as when I was teaching. We're talking about adult learning
Mm.
earlier on, and I took in the editing part of I did a novel course, 10-week novel course,
Right.
and week 9 was editing, and I transcribed without putting the character. I just put CH for character without putting the name in.
Mm.
I took the opening of the second chapter of, I think it was Silkworm,
All right.
I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
or Cuckoo Calling, one of the two, one of the early
Right.
ones, and I couldn't use the first one because it had swearing in it. So and although there was adult learning, so
Mm.
19 upwards, I thought not really the done thing, and so I then gave it to them with a series of questions.
Yeah.
Um, and I said one of the questions was, would you read on? And nobody was really interested in
Really.
reading on. It was taken out of context.
Of course. Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
hadn't read the first
Yeah.
chapter,
Yeah.
but they weren't totally impressed.
Mm.
And one of the other questions was, do you know who wrote it? And so one of them, and I have sort of 16, 17 students, and one of them said, well, it feels like it's a woman trying to write as a man.
Right.
And so one of the other students said, well, hasn't J.K. Rowling done that? So they got it right
Yeah. Yeah.
by default.
Yeah.
And so yes, it was, she loves
Mm.
her adverbs
Mm.
in those
Yes.
anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
But as you
I
say,
think,
it does what it says on the tin.
yeah, yeah,
People love it, and
mm,
I think there's a tendency to be a bit snooty about writing sometimes.
mm,
I've never been that way. I like what I like, and if people don't like it, I feel the same way about my writing. I know not everybody's going to enjoy it, which is
mm,
fine.
mm,
That's the way the world is. I
yeah,
don't expect everybody to.
yeah. Well, one of mine, I always get it the wrong way, up there
All
was
right.
Serial Data. That one
Yeah.
of my first women's fiction.
Yeah.
It came out, that was originally traditionally published. And when it came out, I don't read, I stopped reading reviews. I don't know if you
Mm.
read your reviews. Stop
Occasionally.
reading, yeah, stop reading my reviews. But because this was traditionally published, I thought I'm going to have a look
Mm.
and see. And the first, I don't know if there've probably been others, the first 1-star review said, I don't normally leave reviews for books, but this one was so bad that I felt I had to, which I found hilarious. I read it
Yes.
before
Yeah.
going to bed, and I found
Yeah.
hilarious.
Mm.
And that ended up being a blogger's favourite book of the year.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that proves that it's
Absolutely.
really
And I
everybody's
mean,
thing.
to tell the truth, there are an awful lot of books out these days that are must reads according to everybody else. And
Yeah,
I read them and I think a lot of them I don't even finish.
no,
I just, it's not for everybody. And you have to have a thick skin, as you know, when you
yeah,
put yourself out there. And if you read
yeah,
the reviews, which I used to, I still read some of them, particularly those from people I know.
mm,
Or if it's a new reader, if I don't recognise the name, I might read that as well.
mm.
Um, but yeah, I'd read more of the bad reviews than I do the good reviews, and they tend to
Because
sort of stick
I
out.
suppose they're either funny or constructive. If they tell us why they don't like it, that's
Yeah,
handy.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Very rarely constructive.
yeah, yeah,
And of course, these days Amazon allow you just to give star markings. So
mm,
I
yeah,
call them drive-by 1 stars. So people who
mm,
just go, oh, let's give that a 1 star without ever
yeah,
read it, reading
yeah.
it. So
Because
you
it probably
accept that as
arrived
well.
arrived a day late,
I
or
had that.
the
Well,
packaging was soggy.
I mentioned this the other day. I got a 1 star on the same day. I got a one
Mm,
star because it wouldn't download
right.
from Amazon, and then I got a 5 star because I made very good vacuum cleaners. They got
Oh,
it completely wrong, and
okay.
and had written. They thought they were. they thought they were
reviewing stuff. But then,
reviewing a vacuum cleaner.
yeah,
Yeah.
see that, yeah, they neither of those should have gone up.
No, and I,
You know.
as you do, you contact Amazon and say neither of those should be there, but
Yeah,
they
yeah,
were, still are, I think.
yeah, yeah. But I've left reviews where I've commented on their product and said that they've packed it poorly,
Yes.
and then it's been rejected because I talk about the packaging. But the
Yeah.
packaging is from the company.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah.
that it's not
Yeah.
nothing to do with Amazon. It's
Yeah, there was a
anyway,
debate the
what
other
can you
day
do?
about whether it's a product review or it's an Amazon review.
Yeah,
I say, well, it says product review, so it's about the product, surely,
should be.
which a book is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes. Well, we can all live in hope. But
Yeah.
you were saying earlier
Mm.
on, we will wind this down.
Mm.
It's been nearly an hour now.
Yeah, we're winding
And
down. We've been winding down for half an
have
hour.
you got any Guinness left?
Yeah,
And
I'm
so there we
drained.
go. Yeah. And yes, you were saying about very humbly about you thinking, not necessarily about your writing could be
Mm.
better. But I'm sure if we all went back to our books, even ones, because when I edit, I get it in and do two sweeps, send it back, then
Right.
get it back, do two sweeps, send it
Yeah.
back, and then if they want, I can do a third one and
Mm.
go over it again. And I'm always finding something. If they send it to me 50 times, I'd
Yeah.
find something. And
Yeah.
it's the same with our own writing. We'd always
Oh,
find something to change.
I would, yes. And I think
Yeah.
every writer would go back, and even their very last
Mm,
book, the one I'm writing now, I could change
mm,
100 times before it goes out.
yeah.
Eventually, you have to click go, send.
Yeah.
Eventually, you have to let it go.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you fretted about it too much, you'd never let them out.
No.
If you get too
Mm,
precious about it. So I get
mm.
them as good as I can get them. I use my beta
Absolutely. That's all
readers,
we can
my
do.
editor, my ARC
Yeah.
readers. And when they've
Yeah.
all
Your
said,
aunt.
yeah, yeah, my
Yeah.
aunt, yeah, yeah, the
Yeah.
strictest of them all, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So at that point, you let it go and, it's out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Sending a baby off to college.
Yeah, I've done that as well. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure
Yeah, I've
chatting
really
with you
enjoyed it.
for
Thank you.
a
Yeah.
pint of Guinness
Yes. Yeah.
worth.
I could have had several, so I've limited myself to
Okay.
the
Oh,
one.
okay. Very
Yeah.
good. All right then.
I
Well,
wanted
it's been
to.
an absolute
I didn't
pleasure.
want to
Thank you.
swear too much.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
you've done well so far.
I've reined
That's
myself
brilliant.
in. Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
I really
That is
enjoyed it.
brilliant.
It's been great.
Oh, good. Yeah, me
Yeah,
too. Thank
yeah,
you. Well, hopefully we'll be seeing you in the new year to
yeah,
talk about the
definitely.
first book, Bad to
Yeah,
the Bone,
yeah,
and then hopefully many times thereafter with your audience.
yeah. I
Um,
hope so. I
of
really look forward to
yeah,
that. That should be good.
yeah,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right. Thank you again, Tony
Yeah, thank
Forder.
you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right.
Bye.
Bye bye.